Hello everyone, welcome back to NASCAR Thunder 2004 modding. We are finally at the moment everybody's been waiting for, which is getting stats, rosters, and textures into the game. The day is finally here. We still need some painters and some people to get, involved in the community, to get some more packs out quicker, to get stuff like better tires and tire textures. I have some ugly ones I made. I mean, they're okay, but they don't look great in motion. But regardless of all that, we've got two roster packs, technically a third, but the third one's not 100% complete, but I'm going to give it to you guys anyway, just so you have something to play off of. Those packs are 2003, which is upscaled, not complete. I didn't add Blaney and Spencer yet. This was lowest on the priority list, so I got to it last, unfortunately. 2004 is a full roster of Cup drivers, and 2007 we also have as a full roster of Cup drivers. We're working on 2005. Hopefully that'll be out soon-ish. Big shout out to NCRD for the 2004 stuff. The link will be on screen for his stuff. He made the high-res texture pack for Chase for the Cup on the Dolphin emulator for the GameCube stuff, and gave me permission to port that over to Thunder 04. Also, shout-outs to someone very active in our community who goes by Mr. Mosby, and he has another nickname that I don't remember offhand, but he's been very, very quickly and enthusiastically working on a lot of things, and the 2007 pack is his work. So he's been porting that over for us and working on that. But this is, while this is super exciting and super new, this is the beginning. This is not just a, hey, we're gonna release these and we're done. We're gonna keep going. I'm trying to build a community around it. I have a Patreon up now to help fund paying painters and other people for their work and for their time and effort. But let's get into actually installing and playing and using a texture pack with the roster update, the stat updates, and all that stuff. Well, let's get right into that. First thing you're going to need is a copy of PCSX2, which there's a specific copy. You don't want to go to their site and get a public build. This isn't available anywhere else. I had to do specifically custom coding to make NASCAR Thunder work. You have to download the specific build that I have linked in the description. And note that this only works for Thunder 04 right now. We're going to do other NASCAR games as the community decides. So as you guys vote on it in the future, we'll work on other games. But the current focus is to get many more seasons and many more packs for Thunder 04. The other big thing to keep in mind, guys, with this update, it's not just roster updates, it's not just stats from real life of those different seasons, it's also difficulty balancing. The game normally gets way too easy after the third season in career mode. This should keep it more difficult throughout, at least I think to the 5th or 6th season minimum, but even then you could stop upgrading, and I'm not sure if, I haven't tested all the way on the back end, so maybe a fully upgraded car, you still have to race really well. I'm not sure the actual pace of the AI at their highest. So they might still be challenging even then. I'm not sure yet. But there's only one way to find out, and that's for you guys to get there. There's plenty of settings to adjust. Even if you find they're too hard or too easy, you can tweak that really easily within my little Excel helper sheet. First and foremost, you're going to need Excel. You can use Google Docs version technically, but I recommend using an actual version of Excel rather than Google Docs. I don't know for sure that it'll work with all of the things that I coded in Excel, but it should, but I haven't tested, so not going to say 100% for sure that they all work. As mentioned with the version of PCSX2 that's linked, you're going to need your own set of BIOS, and you're going to need a copy of the game, and I cannot provide those to you. That is something you're going to have to seek out on your own. That's just a legality thing. What I am going to go through with you guys, though, we're going to go through some settings in PCSX2. So once you have it up and running and you have the game going, you're going to want to go to Settings, Game Properties. You're going to get a screen like this. So to enable the mods themselves, we're gonna come back to this, but essentially graphics is what I'm going to go over here. So I recommend for display, you set these to set your aspect ratio to widescreen. It should put the game in widescreen automatically, I believe. These are the settings I'm running. They aren't perfect. I know with my graphics card, my out-of-car view is blurry at a distance. I think that's just an issue with my stuff. I've seen people run this emulator without issue on that front, but I have that problem and I've tried various settings, nothing fixed it. So, but luckily my in-car view is clear and everything's good there. For rendering, I recommend changing the internal resolution. Now, normally I'd say go right up to 5K, but with the texture packs, they actually, with higher quality textures, the game can at 5K run a little choppy. So I recommend I run at 2K. It's plenty clear. It's 4 times the original resolution of the PS2, so it's a lot clearer in my opinion. Everything else I pretty much leave at the default settings. Texture replacement, we're going to have load textures on. We're going to come back to this though, because there is going to be a reason to dump textures, and that's to get your custom cars in career mode, but we'll come back to that. Everything else up here you should be able to leave alone. Shouldn't be an issue there. You may want to set your adapter to your whatever your graphics card currently is, but that by default it should already be set there. And that's it. That's all you have to set in graphics. Don't worry, this texture won't be in the game, won't be in any of the packs by default. But we were talking about maybe doing one for Ricky Bobby paint. But I was just messing around with seeing what goes where on the texture map for the interior. When you open the texture pack folders up, there's only going to be 2 things in here. One of them is going to be an Excel file that should be titled something along the lines of full modder and the year. And then the other is a folder that has a bunch of driver names and cars and a bunch of textures in them. All you're going to have to do to install this is navigate to your documents, PCSX2. And if these folders don't exist, you can create them, but they should, if you ran the game, they should exist. Textures, and you'll see SLUS-20824. That's the number for NASCAR Thunder 2004 specifically. And then a replacements folder. And all you have to do is take this folder. I have 2003 in here. We'll delete that. And copy that over and paste it in here. And that's it. Now in the game, I recommend anytime you apply changes to the textures and changes via the Excel and updating the codes, which we'll get to in a minute. Anytime you do those updates, I recommend resetting the game. You don't have to, but it's highly recommended because I've seen some funky things happen if you just... The other way to get things to cycle is to go to graphics, texture replacement, uncheck load, recheck load, and it will load in the new textures. So that's another way to do it, but that isn't going to get your roster, your stats, and everything else updated. You technically can cycle the cheats, and that will do the other part, but again, we'll get to that. Either way, I recommend resetting. And if you reset and you get stuck at the loading screen, just reset again. The loading screen sometimes will just, if it goes past, there's a point where it jumps forward and is done real quick. And you can press tab in the emulator to speed up loading, but there's a point where it'll jump forward here, boom, and it's done. If it gets past that point where it jumps forward, then you're going to want to reset, because it's just going to infinitely load. So this Excel sheet is going to look intimidating, but don't feel too overwhelmed here. So there's quite a few different tabs in this Excel sheet, but we're not going to go through all of them because a lot of these are for people making packs. I'm just going to cover the parts that you guys need to know to use the texture packs. So first, on the ref tab, there's a bunch of stat modifiers here, and these are to adjust the AI based on the track. So certain tracks, the AI is faster or slower, like the really slow road courses, for instance, but they will get a stat boost when you select the road course. You can change these if you want. They're right here in this column, in column E. You shouldn't need to change these, but if you feel like a certain track is too hard or too easy, you can change that track here. So Atlanta, they're going to have multiple entries for each event. You just enter your percentages you want to modify. Just boost them 10, 15, 20% or either way, depending on what you need and how hard or easy they are. I tried to balance them so that in your rookie season, you should be able to finish about 35th or battle about 35th on legend difficulty. I figure that way, that's usually the sponsor goals in the early career, so that should be about fair. The schedule tab, the only thing you're really going to want to change here, I have some races swapped in and swapped around so that the schedule is a little bit closer to real life. I did make California night for the second event, so it's not just a repeat of 2 Californias, and swap Darlington for Rockingham. You don't really want to mess with this too much. I made the All-Star and the Open and the All-Star itself a little longer. You can get rid of that if you run a higher percentage. If you want to run a season less than 36 races, I actually recommend checking out one of my other videos on editing the schedule, because there's a lot of little details and nuances to cover. But I want this video to be short and specifically on utilizing these packs, not customizing them. The only thing that I think you guys should customize, what percent length your target is and what percent you want to actually have. So if you're at something between 10 and 25%, this drop down will set how frequently you have to pit, because in the game your tire wear and fuel is based on the race length you select, how quick that happens. So I recommend picking one higher than your target percentage. So I like to run 20% race length or somewhere near there, so I pick 25% as my target, or as the one I'm replacing, and then change it to 20%. And that changes all of my races in the schedule to 20% race length. Like I said, though, I did custom length for the Open and the All-Star itself because they're always way short. And this will affect the 100% length by 80% is how the math works out for what I picked. But if you change this to 15, that'll drop that down, and all the races will get shorter. But if you're running something 15, 18, 20%, because I know that range is kind of a big gap for a lot of people, that 10 to 25 is usually where most people want to be, but 10's kind of short and 25 is kind of long, so I recommend just entering your percentage in the 25% field here, and that'll get applied when we apply everything else in the pack. The paints tab you guys can pretty much ignore. This will take care of itself for the most part. The only thing about the paints that I want to cover, if you go back over to the data tab, you're going to see that I have stats and roster and everything else, a lot of driver things. And what you're going to want to do on this tab, if anything, if you're fine with multiple paint schemes for drivers, don't change anything here. If you want every driver to run their primary paint only, just go ahead and change this to 1 in the number of paints column, and then copy that all the way down. So just double click that little box at the bottom right, And that should make it go 1 all the way down. If for some reason it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, which sometimes happens, just put 1 in the first 2 slots and select both and then double click the box at the bottom right. And that'll put everybody at 1 paint scheme. But if you want the multiple paint schemes, just leave this value as is, and this pack is already set up to work with that. Now the main roster sheet, there's a couple fields here that you'll want to enter. Oh, and there's going to be an extra field here. Sorry, it's not shown, but there's going to be a field here to enter your car number for your career mode and maybe your sponsor, depending on whether I get that done today or not. But your car number for career mode, whatever custom car number you're running, you enter it here. The game will not stamp the numbers on. This is only for if you're running a custom paint scheme entirely. If you're running the in-game, what it generates, then you don't have to enter anything here. You just leave it blank. There will be a field for it. You'll see it then in the file, in the final file. The things you're going to have to select, so that percentage we talked about earlier, that is generated via this drop down. So whatever race you're running, so if I think Bristol's a lower percentage, so Bristol's got tougher AI by default, so this selection will change what percentage they have applied. So every time you're about to run another race in the game, you want to select what track you're going to next here to apply the percentage changes to keep the field competitive, but not impossible. This will go off of your settings that I set on the reference sheet, and that'll apply to everybody's stats. Between seasons, you also want to change this season drop down. This will affect the overall stats to the AI, which this may need a little tweaking for your own difficulty as well. You could either just change your track percentages as you go year over year, or wait till you finish well enough with upgrades to try the next level. You don't necessarily have to do it between each year, but I tried to guesstimate a little bit as to what values I think will keep it hard through each season, or at least a little challenging anyway. The stats currently are based on an entire season if you have these blank. If these are blank, then the driver ranks are based on how they did in points. So you'll see that Jimmy Johnson is listed as number 1, Earnhardt Jr. number 2, and so on. You'll see Gordon and Kurt Busch. I didn't cover this, but on these sheets, I did a perception value. Because even though Kurt Busch won, he won with the chase, and if you look at his stats, he had half as many top 5s as Johnson, which, and almost a third of the wins. So obviously Johnson had a better year than Kurt overall, but he had more DNFs. So I have some perception values entered in here, and also for road course ringers, which this will adjust their stats to be better. If you don't want the perception value and you want it based on the straight up points, you can go ahead and just select this entire column and just press delete, and their stats will update as a result of that. I'm going to leave them in though for the pack to start. So back over to the roster sheet. If you don't select any races here, then their stats will be based off that entire season, and they will vary between track types. So short track, speedway, super speedway, and road course, they do have their own unique stats there, which are also based on the results for those track types. But that'll be your only real big variance in your driver skills, so they will in the driver stats. So they'll change about as much as they change in the base game. However, we have a big advantage, and something else I added to this tool. If you've seen the previous videos, you know about this. You can select a specific race from the season. So I'm going to run Daytona. I select Daytona, and I could either select Talladega, or if I just want the Daytona 500 to apply, I can go ahead and just select it for both. But let's say I want the July race to also apply the stats for that. And this will apply as much as I have these percentages here. So 35% for the Daytona 500 will apply. Whatever the results were there, that's how much that affects the stats. 15% of the July race will apply, and 50% of the season will apply. Now you can change these. If you want 100% Daytona 500 stats to be 100% what stats that are applied to the drivers, that's all you have to do is enter 100% here, select the race you want, and set this to 0, and then you're good. That will make their Bristol selected. That will make their stats be based off of just that race. But I prefer a 30-15. It gives some variance. Sorry, a 35-15. That gives some variance of both how they did in the season and how they did in that particular race. So it kind of gives a weird it kind of gives a unique combination to get some difference there. This does not factor in when drivers blew up or crashed, unless they led a lot of laps in the race and or qualified well. Then technically their stats will be a little bit better than, dead last if they wrecked out right away. That can be changed by the person who creates the packs, and that can be changed by you as well. But that's, again, going to be covered in a later video. It was technically covered already in a previous video, but I'm going to go over those things again in a separate one later on for making packs. But if you're just here to race and you're just here to run what we've got, that's all you need to know so far on this. One more piece I want to cover specifically. This data here, you guys do not really want to touch this table other than one particular thing, and that's this series column. The way I have this particular pack set up, and you'll see this in different packs, you'll see different numbers. I have 35 drivers which are listed as full-time. If they have Cup listed here, they are full-time. They will not miss a race. If they are part-time, or in this list listed as Busch, which is how the game treats them, as National Series drivers, I think the game actually calls it. If they're listed as Busch, then they have a chance of being swapped into the roster. They won't necessarily be in the race or not. They just have a chance to be in the mix. If they're listed as fantasy, they only end up in the roster if we run out of Busch drivers. But this particular pack, there's 61 drivers that will be in the mix for the races, so it'll never get down to the fantasy cars. So essentially, fantasy is set up to be, they aren't in part of the race. Cup and Busch. Cup, they're guaranteed to start. Busch, they might. Now, if you like a particular driver who's listed as Busch, so maybe, like me, you're a Dave Blaney fan, and you can just switch him to Cup if you want to make sure he makes every race. That's totally fine. Or, for example, if you don't like a driver, or you don't want a primary driver to run a car, a good example, a weird example might be Derek Cope in the number 50 car. Maybe you don't want him running, so you set him to fantasy. And then PJ Jones, you could set him to Cup to make sure he starts if you like PJ Jones. Or perhaps you come to a road course in the season. You want to make sure that Boris Said is in the race. You want to make sure PJ Jones is in the race. I believe Ron Fellows might be here somewhere. He usually is around that time, maybe not. You can go ahead and set that by changing their Cup, changing this drop down to whatever series you want them to be. Again, Cup for full-time, Busch for part-time, fantasy if you don't want them in the roster. And you can change this between races. You can change this in between each race, but you do have to reset the game completely. You do have to reset the emulator completely to have it apply properly. So save your career mode to your memory card, reset it after applying these changes, and then reload the game, and you should have everything swapped. Another one, Kyle Busch ran part-time. Maybe you're a Kyle Busch fan. You want him full-time. He ran 5 shows that season. So his stats aren't going to be great, probably because he didn't run many shows. But you could always go to the data tab and find Kyle Busch and change this to be he's the best. And it'll take a combined effort based on this percentage and come up with a final stat for him about how high to rank his stats. for the season. Another good example was during the 2004 season, Jeff Burton got replaced by Carl Edwards with about 10 races to go in the season. So if you take Jeff Burton and you set him to fantasy and you take Edwards and set him to Cup, then you have Edwards in your roster instead of Jeff Burton. I currently have it just set up. Jeff Burton ran more races in that car. He's set up as Cup. Now you technically could set them both to Cup and they'll both be on track in the 99 car. I don't recommend that. It's not the greatest thing visually, I think. But if that's what you want to do, you want to have them duke it out for the ride, that'd be kind of funny. You could always do something like that and set them both to Cup or both to Busch and see who makes more races and how that plays out. You could do whatever you want in that regard. But that's just how you edit the roster as far as who's active and who's got a chance to be active and so on. I also want to note at this point, there is a 60 FPS patch for the game. If you want that active, I will note it's not fully tested. I haven't messed with it at every track, and I know sometimes the frame rate can chug with the 60 FPS patch active. I've not noticed it since I set my graphics to 2K, but I've also not been running it a lot, and I know the mirror can be jittery in the game if you have this on. But if you want to enable that, you just go to this cell A6, and you delete these two slashes here, press enter, and that will be active then when you apply these. So last thing, and the most important thing, whenever you make changes here, and whenever you want to apply your changes, so in between your races, anything else, if you change a roster, you want to go to this column A, and you want to select, you want to just click at the top here, anywhere at the top of that column, and it should select that whole column. Go ahead and hit Control-C. There should be a file in your Documents PCSX2 Cheats folder. There should be a file with this specific title. Okay, if not, let me see if I can zoom in. Oh, that doesn't make the text bigger. Great. There should be a .pnatch file here, SLUS-20824 and underscore, and you can see the other numbers here. If there's not one, then you should be able to enable it in the game by going to Settings, Game Properties, Cheats, and then just check Enabled Cheats. That should generate a file, I believe. If not, it's literally just a text file. You could open Notepad and create it. So you just open Notepad and then File, Save As, and change the extension to .pnatch. And save it with this name in this location. Once you have that file there, what you've copied out of Excel, you just paste it in there, then make sure you save it again. So I'm actually going to use I use Notepad++. It's just a slightly different version. So I hit Control-A to select everything that's in this file so I can get rid of what's already there. You can press Delete, or you can just paste with Control-V after you have everything selected. So again, Control-A to select everything, Control-V to paste, and that will put your new settings in. Just make sure you hit Save. After you've saved, then you need to reset the game, and it should say so many cheats enabled up in the corner. If you don't see that, you don't have them enabled. So you want to go ahead and check them by going to Settings, Game Properties, Cheats. Go ahead and check that, and it should say how many are enabled. But you're going to have to do another reset to make sure they load properly here. So the only real annoyance is that you'll have to do this in between each race in career mode if you want the stats to apply, but I promise you it is worth it. To be able to race against the real life stats for that individual race is really cool. If you do a reset a few times and it doesn't work, you could always do shutdown without saving. Again, I recommend pressing tab to speed up the emulator. This should make it go twice as fast for loading, and I do that on loading screens anyway all the time. But eventually it'll let you in, and you should see I don't have the textures enabled. So if you have this problem like I do, you go settings, game properties, graphics, texture replacement. Oh, you know what? I do have them enabled, but I don't have the right. Something else to keep in mind, guys, there's this start year value. When you start a new career, you can change the starting year by copying these two lines to your PNatch file. And I recommend only doing this and then saving the career mode right away, getting rid of those two lines in your PNatch file and reloading the game. Once it's saved on your career mode, that year will then increment. If you leave this code in when you get to a new season, it's not going to increment, and that may cause other issues. But I actually don't really recommend changing this most cases, because the career mode will only run to 2023. I haven't tried setting it beyond that, but if you start this value at 2022, then the career mode's only going to be 2 seasons long, and that's it. So I recommend only either setting it to a lower number, if maybe eventually we get a 2000 pack or something like that. But I don't recommend really even. You could change it to 2004, you're only going to lose a season, no big deal. But when we get to newer stuff, if you're running a 2024 pack, if you want an actual career mode to last, you won't want to change this value at all. So you could leave it as 2003. Then you don't even have to enter the code. But if you want a custom year, you change this, you put these codes, you copy these over to your PNatch file in addition to the column A data. Just for your initial career mode start, you can technically do it after the fact on a load, but I don't know if that'll mess things up or not. So I recommend doing it on a new career and then saving that career and then getting rid of those two lines in your PNatch file. Alright guys, next we're going to cover how to get your custom car into career mode. Now, as you can see, the preview is pretty easy. The only thing you have to do with that is name a file in your replacements folder career.png, and that should load in no problem. The issue, however, if you change your colors, which you're going to want to if you don't do a custom pitbox file, you'll want to change your colors in here so that your pit crew actually looks, matches your paint scheme. But if you don't, if you don't change those colors, then the file names actually should match up to what I have if you just choose the first option for career mode car, that number 192. Your number should be set in the Excel sheet, and that should take effect with the cheat codes. I'm not going to name all the things, but let's just say I did. Your sponsors are going to, oh, that number's not working. I have to look at that. It should be in the final version, but just ignore it. The sponsors will affect what the file name is for the file that gets output. So when you go to your first race, you'll have to export your career car to get the file name that we need to replace, and I'll walk you through that. So don't mind my interior still. So you switch the add a car view, and you can pause the game. You don't have to, but I recommend going qualifying to do this. Then you just dump textures for a second, then you uncheck it. You only give it that second or so to do it, and you shouldn't have a crazy amount. So you'll notice things like your pit sign in here. I usually sort by height or width, but you have to hit more to get that option. So I right click, sort by. Size also works. So right there's my car file, and you can see this texture name here. So you hit F2, then Control C to copy, and go over your replacements folder. Oh, by the way, this is the dumps folder. It's in the same place as your replacements, just named a different thing. Should be there automatically. Then you're going to need 3 extra copies of your car texture. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F2 on one of them and paste that name. And I'm going to do the same again, except this time I'm changing the last few digits to 2213. And then I'm going to do it one last time and change the last 4 digits or characters to 1DD3. That will, essentially this is supposed to be your high res when the car is close to the screen. and I realize the player, you're not going to see them far away except in replays. So you'll want the 2213 for medium distance and 1DD3 for far distance replacement. This one here, I'm going to include these in a file, but this one here is your career mode texture for the standings. It is offset. It has a lot of white space. You got to leave that in, and that should show up okay. At that name, shouldn't have to rename that. But the pit box and the pit sign, and I'm not sure if this one works or not. Okay, it is working right now. So that should work as is. That shouldn't need to be renamed. But from your dumps folder, you're going to want to find your car. Your pit crew should, if you leave the default settings, I think your pit crew ends up being a black box. Right here's the pit sign, so we're going to hit F2, copy that, go over here, hit F2, and paste that one. That will change if your sponsor changes or if you paint the car, change your number in the game. So you'll have to redo that step. You don't see my pit crew, however. I believe the pit box is solid black. We'll just go ahead and... Oh, it looks like it actually replaced it. So that name won't change either. Okay, good. So the car number, the pit box, and I believe this icon and the in-car shouldn't change if you don't change the generic paint scheme. Your pit sign will change based on the sponsor. Every time you change a sponsor or anytime you change the paint scheme or the number, that's likely to change. Same with your car. Whenever the paint scheme changes, the sponsor changes, you're going to have to redo that export. Now the driver sleeves in the in-car, if you change the paint scheme, that'll also update. So you'll need to export that one as well and then find it. That one's a little tougher to find usually. It blends in. It doesn't look like anything in particular, but it's just it just looks like this. But that one you may need to re-grab the name if you want to customize the sleeves from your in-car view in the game here. Let's see, so my sleeves are, minding the Fig Newtons, my sleeves are black and orange. I didn't bother with making them look all textury and have I didn't bother to make them look nice. I was just testing to make sure that they could get replaced. Alright, so that's it for your career mode for getting your custom car. So we're here at the final race, or after the season's over. Don't mind the results. They're actually based off Daytona, although they still look like they're pretty accurate drivers. They're based on a combination of Daytona's results and the season points. I never actually changed the tracks as I went through, which is okay. We're just messing about here. So we're at the point where we want to start a new season. I'm going to make a save, and I recommend you do something like this where you say, we're going to say we're at the end of 03. And I'm gonna make that as a separate save just to be safe, so I have a backup. And we'll save over the main one here. So what I'll do, what I recommend is that if you're changing packs, so the end of the season comes up, you want to change to a new year, I recommend that you change before the new season. That said though, you can change packs at any time. I recommend doing it before the new season just because if you have a schedule change, I don't know for sure that the schedule change won't bug out if you do it mid-season. I can't promise anything there, but if you do it in the off-season, it definitely works. That said though, let's go ahead and just try it. Let's find out maybe together. So we start the new year. There shouldn't be any retirees if you've been using the pack. It's supposed to keep everybody active just so that we have the same roster and the same drivers assigned to cars as you change packs from year to year. We don't want them to retire. Now, if you want to run the full career mode with driver birth years, you can change that data in the Excel sheet. And if you want to run the whole career mode with one set of drivers, you can. You could add driver names for the other fantasy drivers, the other Busch drivers, and whatever you have saved in the game. And they'll do their own silly season just the same. So you can do that if you want to.
However, the way I see most people using this is changing year to year the real life roster into the game. So in that case, we do not want anyone to retire, because replacing the texture pack, the driver swaps will be out of whack, and things can get a little weird. If you made the Bud Shootout, you could go ahead and into the new season, run the Bud Shootout, and then switch your texture pack, and that should work. Again, the schedule's where it may get a little funky. I'm not 100% on that, but you can try it at your own risk. Just make extra saves. Maybe run the shootout for fun, just to see, and then simulate it the next time, or whatever, however you want to do there, if you're not able to switch them. So to switch texture packs mid-season, again, you want to make a save. So I'm just going to overwrite my main one here, because I have that 2003 and one. You're going to go ahead. I would recommend shutting down the game. It doesn't matter though. You can do a reset later, but I'm just going to shut it down. So when you're ready to start that new season with the game shut down, you want to copy the textures for the new pack you have, and you paste them in your replacements folder. Then go ahead and delete the old one, or move it elsewhere. If you have multiples in here, it'll flip-flop between the textures, or maybe load the wrong one. It's kind of a little weird when it does that. Change your driver if you want from the packs. There's other stuff to do. This pack has textures and extra buttons and such for an Xbox controller and the different series logos. So we're going to go ahead and include that one. We're going to go back over to Excel, and in Excel you want the new season. Then go ahead and just select column A. Make sure you have your races set and everything you set that you want. Select column A, copy, then go over to your PNATCH file, that cheat codes file, and Control A to select all, Control V to paste, hit save, make sure you hit save, then go ahead and relaunch NASCAR Thunder. So now you can see immediately this new set is loaded. It says NASCAR 7 on the title screen, even though that's not correct. It has NASCAR and Fox logos here, Busch Series logos, Nextel Cup logos, so on and so forth. So then go ahead to your career, hit load, and we're going to load that career we just saved. And you'll notice my background's a little different too. I believe that's part of his part of the patch Mr. Mosby made, or part of the textures Mr. Mosby made. You see my car number's working now. That was wrong in the other file. I'll have that fixed. So now, if I go and I simulate or race the next one, you'll see that the names and the numbers still match up correctly, but we have our 2007 roster actually in, Juan Montoya in the 42, McMurray in the 26, and so on. Just to show, I will go into a race just to show you guys the other textures. I do want to note, however, the stats and the historical stats of drivers are going to be skewed, because drivers are going to get mapped to other drivers at different times, but their stats should still reflect their actual ability here. So historical stats beyond the current season are going to be wrong. Apologies for the foggy window. Oh, and my car is going to be terrible, and I didn't change the performance for California, but well, they checked up, so maybe it'll be okay. But you can see I have the 2007 textures in, and everything swapped okay. We got driver ratings working the way they're supposed to be. There are some textures when drafting that seem to not be named correctly. I will admit I've not figured out exactly why. Some of them are wrong and some of them are right. But that is something I am determined to do at some point. It just shows a different image sometimes when you're drafting with people. But otherwise, you got the car textures right, and mine's not right because my sponsor changed. So I have to update that, do the same dump steps that we did before to be able to do that. And you can do that in the middle of a race. The other thing is, after you've dumped and renamed your files, you want to go to texture replacement and cycle loading them. My car should change to my custom paint. And that's going to do it, guys, for how to install and use texture packs for NASCAR Thunder 2004.
There are other things in the works over the next few weeks, months. I don't have a specific timeline. We are going to release more packs as a community. If you want to help us out, check out the Patreon. If you want to join us and be more active in the community, check out our Discord or just see what's being worked on. Something else I want to work on is a way to update the point standings to be able to run a chase or to be able to run a playoff in career mode. That's going to take some work, but it is absolutely possible. I just have to figure out exactly how to map the data and make a tool to make that easier for you guys. But that's going to do it. I hope you guys have fun playing Thunder 04 with custom textures and rosters and stats. It is, in my opinion, a much better experience, and we have a lot more coming your way. Just stay tuned, but enjoy in the meantime some beautiful high-res textures.